Welcome folks. In this tutorial I'm going to show you how to record a macro in Excel 2010. Before we start, we need the Developer tab on top of the spreadsheet. To bring up the Developer tab, you would go to File, then go to Options, go to Customize Ribbon, and then make sure that you check the Developer tab option in this list. What this will do is that this will bring up a Developer tab on the top of your screen like this. And this will give you the ability to record macros, which is right here. So basically what we're going to do is record a macro, and I'm going to show you two different techniques, the absolute method and then the relative reference method to record a macro. By default, all of the macros are recorded with an absolute reference. So here's what's an absolute reference. When you record a macro, let's go ahead and start recording a macro. I'm just going to go ahead and call it macro 1. You can call it anything you want, assign a shortcut, and put in a description. I'm just going to put in test so that I can delete it later. Go ahead and click on OK. Alright, now any action that I do on the spreadsheet will actually be recorded because the macro is just recording all of the actions that I do on the spreadsheet. So let's say if I start from column A1 and cell A1, and I'm just going to go ahead and type something. I'm going to have a serial number, let's say name and email. So these are the three options that I just want to have. What I can do, I'm going to quickly go ahead and do is format these. I want them to be centered. I want a different color for the font, and maybe even a different color for the background. So I'm just going to go ahead and format these, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the macro recording. Now, if I go to sheet 2, all I have to do to run the macro is just go ahead and click on the macro tab. My first macro that I recorded, macro 1, will show up, and if I go ahead and click on run, it will go ahead and populate those fields for me. It will just repeat the action that I just did. Now, check this out. I'm going to go to sheet 3. Now, it does not matter where I am in the spreadsheet. If I just go ahead and click on macro and I run it, it automatically starts populating the information from cell A1 through C1. Now, this is an absolute macro. That's why it's doing this. Now, if you wanted to record a relative macro with a relative reference, make sure that you check this box. Use relative reference for the macro. And now, if we do this, I'm going to go ahead and record another macro and then show you what the difference is. Let's start another macro. And I'm going to call it macro 1, but this is with the relative reference. And go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to repeat the same process. I want to have the same information, and I will call this email. Let's go ahead and highlight this and quickly format it to put a bold to the text. Alright, now that I have the information up here, I'm just going to go ahead and stop the macro. Now, since we have recorded this macro as a relative macro, it does depend where you are in the spreadsheet at a moment. So for example, if I wanted to paste the same information in here with a macro, I would just go to macro, run the relative macro, and when I run it, notice that the position of my cursor, or the position of the active cell, is taken into account. Whereas in the absolute method, it really did not matter where I was in the spreadsheet. So I just started a new sheet. Let's say I'm in C8. If I run the relative macro one more time, if I run the relative macro, it will populate the information where my active cell is right now. But if I go ahead and run the absolute method, it's just going to go ahead and populate starting from cell A1 through C1. So those were the two differences. Okay, so now if you just want to go ahead and save your spreadsheet, all you have to do is just click on the Save tab, and I'm just going to call this macro, and I'll go ahead and try to save it. But I will get a message that this spreadsheet has a macro in it, So we cannot actually save this as an XLSX document. We actually have to select the Excel macro enabled workbook option from down bottom, and then we'll be able to save the spreadsheet. Well, that's it for this tutorial. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section or visit my website at www.ndigilabs.com.